Welcome. Gio and I are excited to welcome our guest today. Amy King is a workplace sustainability expert, a leader in the co-working industry, and the founder of Good Coworking in Dallas, Texas. Amy, thank you for joining us today.
So thrilled to be here. This has been on my bucket list, so I cannot lie.
When Gio said, let's do Amy King, I was like, how has Amy King not been on my podcast before? So I'm Googling, like, of course she's been on the podcast. I just need to find which episode it was. And I was like, not coming up. She has not been on the podcast. So long overdue for sure. So I'm glad we're doing this.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I mean, if you look at the space behind me, this is her space, right? And so I've long been a fan of what Amy's built. Not just the building is awesome. It's in an upcoming part of Dallas that's quickly gentrifying, but she's built an incredible community. So I can't wait to get into kind of how and where and all the things that come to having built this, because she's built a incredible community here. And Amy, why don't you start with that? Kind of how did you get into co-working, and then ultimately, how did you find this building? I know you put a ton of work into the sustainability of this building to get it where it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. And you win for the background. I'm going to use that background for my Zoom calls from now on. So, I came to co-working in a really interesting way back when I was still living in DC, which is my hometown. I was working for the national organization of the U.S. Green Building Council, Usgbc, and they had hired me. That was my kind of first foray into a full-time sustainability job. I've always had a sustainability lens in everything I've done in terms of my career, but I learned about co-working when I was doing leadership development. I had launched the Usgbc Leadership Institute for the organization, and in partnership with our CEO and COO. And our goal was to convene experts around the world around sustainability and leadership development in this growing field. ESG was not a term yet. And one of our organizational development consultants was talking to me one day, and I said, well, our CEO has this vision for us having this offsite space for staff and others to show up and have whiteboards for cool meetings and offsites and bring teams together. And our consultant looked at me and said, oh, you mean like the hub? And I said, what's the hub? It was like the needle scratching off the record moment. And that was how I discovered co-working. And that was in, I believe, 2011. And so I was already working on a transition out of USGBC to move to Dallas to be with my life partner, Gary, who's a green architect and has all the lifetime professional accolades around that. He helped create the LEED for Homes rating system. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do when I got to town, but I knew I wanted to open a co-working space. And so that's how the idea came about. And then a little piece of trivia, when I first moved to town, there weren't really many co-working spaces yet, but I was one of the first members, kind of patient zero for Nick Clark's Common Dust Deep Ellum. Like, I was buzzing on the door before they were even open saying, when are you guys opening? So,
you know what?
Awesome.
I know a lot of this story, which is why we must have talked through this and I'd never hit record, but that's a fun fact. I didn't know that one. So what year was that?
That was 2012. That was fall of 2012. And then I met my first community manager and my kind of work wife, employee number one, at a bar restaurant in town, and told her about my vision for co-working with social impact and sustainability. And she said, well, you have to meet my friend Justin, who's opening a space, which was then called the Grove, it was a pivotal space in the early years of co-working in DFW. It's since closed for landlord reasons and other circumstances, but I met a lot of social impact and social entrepreneurs. So I have Justin to thank for that. And also just learning what to do and what not to do, and having the member perspective was incredibly valuable.
Amy, I have a quick question. Was there a hub in DC? Like, when she mentioned the hub, did you run out and find one?
It's funny. There had been an impact hub, but it wasn't active. And so in fact, DC was strange. There wasn't much co-working going on at the time.
Totally. A weird market. And then it sort of exploded with like WeWork and Industrious.
Yeah. And
big,
at some point, Verizon was opening a space across from the Usgbc headquarters. And I was really excited to see how that was going to play out. And then I don't think I don't think it's active, but
I was just curious how much the Impact Hub concept like ignited your passion for co-working, because it totally aligns with your values. And I wonder if you'd wandered into like an Industrious, if you would have accelerated as quickly as if someone, other than someone saying the hub, because that is so you.
Right.
You know?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. My design aesthetic was very much like Class A building, because I worked at USGBC's LEED Platinum headquarters, and we had, tourists every day walking by our cubicles taking photos of us. We were like the prototype for good co-working, good work employees in a healthy space. And so I had that budget in mind, but then actually didn't have that type of budget, Class A budget for furnishings and everything when it came to do my actual space. And I also was
every operator out there, by the way,
right?
This is what I want.
Yeah, I was also pretty naive about the social entrepreneurship space in Dallas. I thought that it was a little more robust, and thought, oh, I'm going to have this kind of incubator for sustainability focused co-working, sustainability focused startups. And I had to very quickly adjust my umbrella to be more of the total social impact space, and then just use sustainability as a differentiator for the culture and the actual building construction itself with the green building features.
So how did you was this building that I'm sitting in your only location? This is where you started it?
Yes, believe it or not, this was the first building that we looked at. I totally lucked out. I did not have to go through a broker or see a bunch of spaces. It was one of those serendipitous things where I had met my business partner, who's also co-landlord. He wears both hats. I had met him because he was a branding client of mine, because while I was kind of building my network and attending co-working conferences and doing research, I was doing brand strategy and social impact brand strategy for social enterprises. And so he was one of my first clients. In fact, I brought him to the Juicy conference as a sponsor. He founded a company called Loftwall.
I remember that.
And we were,
and I had a weird connection to him.
Yeah, I said, co-working is a great niche brand for your product. Let's put your product in co-working spaces in Dallas and see how people move walls over time as companies grow and change. And it was a really great campaign. We got some great legwork out of it. And I took him to Juicy, and he kind of drank the Kool-Aid when it comes to co-working. And he had, in the same breath, said, I'm starting to look at buying some buildings in South Dallas. And that was when the light bulb went off for me. And I said, well, I wasn't sure how I was going to manifest the building part of things. And so he just called me up one day and asked myself and my life partner, Gary, who's the architect, to come look at this building. And we knew it from the second we walked in the door. The three of us could see the promise, even though it was kind of a horror show looking, it was an abandoned building with no lighting, industrial warehouse with water on the floor and one blinking fluorescent bulb. You had to really have some creativity and imagination.
And some vision. You saw the future.
I just envisioned like a Saw movie or something with the blinking light.
That's totally what it was.
And we had open industrial space.
And we had pigeons living in here. So the pigeon became our mascot. That's another funny story.
So I remember
trivia.
I remember when I first toured the space with you, walked me through the entire thing, and there's a really cool courtyard. And so you were pointing out everything you did for sustainability. So can you kind of talk us through what that process was like and everything you did to make it sustainable?
Well, not everyone can afford to do LEED certification, but because I came from the USGBC world, I was bound and determined to follow that, at least follow the framework. But I said, we're going to get certification somehow, some way. And so LEED is a great framework, even if you don't actually end up investing in the certification itself. It's a great framework for, the checklist itself is divided into all these different categories, like, your site selection, water, et cetera, construction processes. And so if you follow that, it's a really great formula for making sure that you don't cut any corners, and that if you actually do the certification, it's third party verified. So that the building, as a consumer, the building is actually really not greenwashed. But gosh, we did everything from, what we did was we started with a design charrette with Gensler, did us a solid as a firm locally. And we sat in the room with them and the architect and my co-owner and envisioned what the space would be like in terms of flow and areas. Everyone talks about task-based work and zones. So we sketched out zones, and they did some really sexy renderings for us of the space that were, if we actually use those products, it would be Class A. But it really helped us think about space utilization. And then we put the LEED lens on top of it in terms of energy and materials. And our contractor, it was his first LEED project as well. So there was a lot of education there. And luckily I had enough technical knowledge with my basic LEED Green Associate credential to be on site and to make sure that all the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed, along with Gary. And we looked at the building envelope, and that includes having a reflective, one of the really cool features is a reflective white roof. You may have heard how, white, the whole issue with cities is all this dark pavement and it absorbs the heat and it creates the heat island effect. Well, the white TPO roof surface reflects heat, and so it's automatically reducing your power bills. And then I coincidentally had a friend with a local air quality nonprofit who came to me, and jokingly, I thought he wanted to get coffee because he wanted free office space, but it turned out he had a grant for me for solar panels. So another serendipitous thing that doesn't just happen, people don't just hand you money for solar panels, but I was able to get, based on this grant, 454 solar panels on the roof through a partnership with a local solar provider, who in turn, as kind of a marketing partnership that we carved out, they gave us a substantial amount of the energy rebate money back. And because the solar provider, based on the deal, would get that money. And I was able to in turn invest that in some of the features that we're doing to pursue well building certification for the co-working space on the first floor. So it's, a lot of bartering and negotiation and obviously we took a 1950s building, so it had an existing footprint and orientation. So we couldn't look at how the solar, but Gary cut a lot of windows for daylighting. And daylighting is one of the big features both for LEED and WELL, where actually in WELL, they measure how far the daylight comes in, and they're looking at each seat in the space. A tester goes around and sits in every single workspace and tests the lighting levels, both daytime and nighttime. And so it's making sure, you can get really fancy from there around circadian lighting, and which really optimizes your productivity, et cetera. But I could probably talk for 3 hours in terms of all of our sustainability features, but I'll just say we do a lot around waste management. We just got certified green business for the city of Dallas, which is a little known program, and we got platinum this year. You have to recertify every year.
Wow.
And we are diverting 86% of our waste, which means that our members have gotten way better at recycling. And we also have a composting partnership with a local social enterprise called Turn that just got the contract for the DFW airport. And believe it or not, Dallas has one of the most green airports in the country.
I would not have known that.
I know, you never would think. But yeah, they've won all types of national and international awards.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you had any specific questions, I mean, we also looked at pretty much everything is focused around between LEED and WELL rating systems. You're thinking of everything in terms of energy savings and health and productivity for the people in the building.
I mean, even as far as the plants, right, that you've got in the space.
Yeah, we have a running count. We have a little whiteboard thing behind the front desk, and we keep a count of plants. And I think we're at like 246 right now. and my team lovingly waters them, bless their hearts, because if we had a bigger budget, we would have a service for that. But Gary, who's our architect, he also offices here, and he is the plant whisperer. So he walks by a plant and it just perks up. But people, it really resonates with people, especially, we have to have some, as far as design goes, you can even see in the background in Gio's photo, some of the wood features. You have to have some natural features, like with wood. Our cubicles for the dedicated desks have wood panels. So you're bringing in, that's something called biophilia, where you have components of nature. Either they represent nature, like a photo of a plant, or an actual plant, or materials from nature, like wood. That really warms up the space, since we're in such an industrial building. It was an industrial warehouse in the beginning. It was a furniture showroom. So those are all things to think about. I mean, if I had my druthers, I'd go less industrial in the future, but it kind of works for our funky, creative green vibe.
I have a couple
I
of
just
questions.
love your passion. Go for it.
So I love your passion too. Related to my questions. Well, so first, I love your comment about using the checklist, like even if you're not going to get certified, because even the plant piece and the lighting piece, Gio and I were just talking yesterday about how different operators approach who gets the light differently.
Yes.
Which is, a total, challenge. And so in your checklist, everyone needs to have some light, but even the plants, I'm sure there are lots of like details that you could think through. How can I do this? But this relates to my other question, which is, we had Work Bar on the podcast, and they mentioned, it's really expensive to do this type of work. And
yes,
you have to have a landlord
certification.
Yeah, super committed. So talk about the tension around like the business model of co-working, but doing this like sustainability model. I will say one other quick comment. You probably saw this. I didn't read the whole article, but Kat Johnson's newsletter referenced an Anthony Slumber article in which he said, like, it's table stakes, at least in the UK. Like it's like neutral to be sustainable from, so if, or I don't know if it's but or and the co-working model, there's a lot of tension around, build out costs and amenities and making the model sustainable so that the operator can stay in business. Can you just like kind of talk?
There's a lot there to unpack. I think, and as far as the building owner goes, it totally depends on how long you want to hold on to your asset, whether the ROI pays off. I mean, I'll tell you, I texted our architect before this call, and he told me that the cost for LEED, the cost investment for doing a gut rehab of an existing building and going for LEED, and we got LEED Gold, which is the second highest level, was 3%. And then the return on investment, because I got the solar panels, was a 3-year payoff, which is really short. Usually it's longer, but it's not that much longer. So I think, as far as a differentiator these days, I mean, the wellness features seem like a no-brainer, because post-pandemic, you want people safe in your life, right? And there's a lot, you can get the well safety seal. You don't even have to do well certification. You can do the basics and get the well safety seal. But then with LEED, I still, of course, I'm a LEED champion, but I truly believe in it because it's third-party verified, and it's a marketing differentiator. When you're, if you had 2 Class A buildings, and as a tenant you were going to want to choose, would you choose the LEED certified building or the non-LEED certified building? I would choose the LEED certified building because it's going to make me look, more progressive and in tune with the times for my tenants. And Gen Z and millennials, quite frankly, are demanding that the businesses that they patronize care about the environment and care about social impact and care about them as humans. And when you invest in your talent, you have better talent retention, so it costs you less. So I think, the payoff is not just the energy savings and the construction, it's also talent retention and tenant retention, tenant and talent. I'm gonna coin that, TNT. So it's, there is tension though. I mean, there's, we made it was a negotiation through the whole design and construction process with our landlord. And even when my business partner co-owns the co-working space. So he had to wear both hats, which, Adam Newman's in the same boat. Wasn't quite as lucrative for my business partner as Adam, but Adam has worn both hats along the way with WeWork, owning the buildings. And but it's, I would say I have a ton of lessons learned. We still have lighting issues. We're about to in renegotiating our lease next year. And also a lot of people think that we are in a management agreement, but I could not pull off management agreement for my first space. I tried. I was texting everyone in the industry and trying, but it didn't happen. So we're still on a lease, and we're going to do a lighting package upgrade because I want to still get WELL certification. And our landlord is behind that, mostly because he knows it's going to make, we're the ground floor co-working. We are we're the operators of the building pretty much. We manage all the shared amenities, and we're the hospitality. And the first floor is the signature. There are larger offices upstairs that are just direct lease through the landlord, but it will make the building more appealing, right? The lighting it's not that big of an investment. And I'm just technically trying to navigate how I can be sure to meet the WELL certification numbers. And it's a little dicey, but there's tension around stormwater management outside the building. We have leaks, even though we're only 4.5 years in from our construction. It's an old 1950s building. It's still going to have leaks, but there were some things that we could have done that would have better sealed the building. And there's pavement everywhere. We're definitely in a tough situation in terms of an urban landscape. So the other thing is furnishings. I had to just experiment along the way in improv because, furnishings off gas, volatile organic compounds. So that new car smell, it's toxic chemicals. So roll your windows down, folks. And it's really, we could just bypass that by getting used furniture, but I have a certain taste in furniture, and, luckily knew some contract furniture folks. So it all worked out, but there are many decision points. And I think LEED as a framework is great, but it's very high level technical. So I'm actually trying to work on some kind of book, guide, etc., for the rest of us who are not pursuing LEED, who want to do the right thing in terms of being co-working operators. And there's kind of path A where you have your landlord support, and then there's path B when you don't. And what can you do just as an occupier to make it the best possible scenario for your members?
So I know that you obviously are one of the foremost thought leaders when it comes to sustainability in the country. And I know you spent a bunch of time looking at different projects and learning from what other people are doing. And also there's a lot of people that seek you out to ask you questions. So what do you kind of seen a trend with landlords and developers looking to become more sustainable?
Well, honestly, I think ESG, the movement of ESG, which is, for the listeners, environmental social governance, it's the new terminology, the new buzzword for corporate environmental social responsibility. And it's because Wall Street investors, if you're a US investor, are looking at the carbon footprint and the social footprint of corporations. And the SEC is looking at new guidelines for transparent reporting in the US. So that's a rapidly evolving landscape, and the commercial real estate world is having to catch up because of that. And so they're having to look at everything from, on the debt management side, they're having to look on the asset management side, and on basically every angle of their portfolio, and make some hard decisions. Anthony Slumbers, he is incredible because he has the UK perspective from commercial real estate and is really banging the drum around sustainability. He keynoted Juicy last year in New York, and he follow him on LinkedIn. He is always writing about it, and the UK is ahead. They've got they already have frameworks in place from a public company reporting standpoint, etc. But everyone's just catching up, and really it comes down to the flex space, I think, is a little behind in the sense of we're just figuring out as an industry, right? And everyone's trying to just figure out flex, how to do flex for part of their portfolio. And there's so much else to consider besides the sustainability piece. So for landlords and developers who are already looking at sustainability, you know, maybe had a commitment to doing LEED for a certain percentage of their portfolio, or WELL, or Living Building Challenge, they already know, like, okay, I'm gonna at least invest in this for this percentage of my Class A buildings. And then from an energy savings perspective, maybe I'll look at some of my older buildings and get them up to speed. I mean, the whole commercial real estate industry has to look at it, because the building, I mean, gosh, in Manhattan, the commercial buildings in Midtown are like over 57 years old, I think. And from a resiliency standpoint, they have to do construction to bring all of the stuff away from the ground floor for when things flood. And people are starting to look at this holistically, like energy savings wise. I think it depends on what city you're in. New York is very progressive, and they're pushing for every single building, all of the older commercial buildings, to get up to snuff with energy savings. And there are some industry organizations that are really leading the way, like the Usgbc chapter in New York, Urban Green. So it depends on what market you're in. And I think the big question is always, where's the leadership going to come from? Is it going to come from the top and come from the building owners? Is it going to come from the tenants? And I think it has to come from both sides. I think, you know, just like anything else, like with, you know, customers demand sustainable products, so corporations start to change. And it, you know, it'll be the same thing in commercial real estate. But also, co-working operators have a real opportunity to show some leadership and innovation here. And you don't have to do everything. You can just, you know, slowly over time add some different features. And I think it's relevant for any type of space, from a Regis to a you know, a product that is kind of bridges, like middle of the road, like work suites, to a super funky creative space like us. I think the wellness and the sustainability features just resonate because people feel better in the space. And that's what it comes down to, is making people feel better because they want to stay and they want to come back. And that's my why, is because when I first went to USGBC, first week of the office, I put down my inhaler and I never picked it up again. And I was a lifelong, like, hospitalized asthmatic kid. And now I would have a really hard time not working in a green building. And yeah, I was asked by our CEO to oversee the green rebuilding of New Orleans after Katrina. And you look at the schools and how the terrible situation in the schools. The schools weren't just damaged by the storm, they were in terrible disrepair, moldy school books, you know, just hot mess. And you put a kid in a LEED Platinum, I get choked up. You put a kid in a LEED Platinum building and tell them you believe in them, and all of a sudden they don't have to stay home sick from school. That means it has a ripple effect. Their parents then don't have to stay home from work. It's like has multi-generational educational ripple effect. So green buildings aren't just about offices. In fact, we had some kids in here with their parents the other day, and they said, God, I wish my school looked like this. And like, you know, honestly, like, I'm just about us designing awesome spaces for people to live and work where you feel good and do the right thing for the planet. Cause, you know, there's this little climate change thing going on.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love that part of the conversation. I mean, we just had a conversation with Lisa Sky, and she was basically sharing the same thing that they've done in her spaces. And Jamie has been in her spaces. Unfortunately, I never have been, but I mean, that's a big part of it, is actually going out of our way to make some of those decisions. And the ESG, which you brought up, which kind of leads on to the topic that I brought up with your community, right? I mean, it's amazing the inclusion and diversity that you've got here, the social impact. I mean, I still remember walking the space, you're like, and that's a nonprofit that does X, and there's another nonprofit that does Y. And it was just so cool to see. But I mean, you kind of, before we jumped on here, you were giving me some of the stats of your members. You want to share those with us?
Yeah, so I did a demographic survey because I wanted to actually like know for sure that my kind of, spaghetti at the wall assessment was correct. And it's we're currently 45% African American and 65% female. And it's, you walk into the space and it just feels, I grew up in DC area, and my dad was the one white dude who worked for the DC government. And so like, I've always felt uncomfortable in non-diverse spaces. And so that's just what I created, right? I could talk all about how we did that, but the best piece of advice I got was pick the 5 people you can't live without to build your community, because they have great networks behind them. Like if you two lived in, well, you live in Dallas, Gio, but you're travel and you're in the industry. But if you two lived in Dallas, you would be on my top 5, because you have amazing networks of interesting, diverse people behind you. So if you attract those core people, they'll bring their friends and their clients, et cetera, et cetera. And that's, how I just got number 5 on my list. She just got an office. It took 4.5 years, but really that. it's yeah, I bought her some flowers and said, guess what? You were in my top 5. So I feel like it's my mic drop moment, but it's, we ended up maybe looking a little bit like an impact hub, but we also have law firm upstairs, and we have an arts lawyer in the space and green building consultants, but it's also where we are geographically. We are uniquely positioned between South Dallas, which is kind of an traditionally under-resourced area of town that was bisected by the freeways in the 60s, and downtown and Deep Ellum. And so we are a great bridge for some of the nonprofits doing work in the South Dallas community. And they love it because we have free parking, we have meeting rooms, they can use it as a community space. And we're also close to a lot of unhoused resource centers, which makes a very interesting situation as well. And we have an agency in the space that does second chance staffing. So we have, people walking in suits to people who are unhoused walking in our space on a daily basis. And somehow it just all works because they're all good people. So that's, organically how it's happened. And we've been intentional with some of our marketing as well, but that's really what it looks like.
So have you ever kicked anyone out of your space for not fitting in?
We had a really interesting situation with a gentleman who was unhoused, who my first staff person thought she could help. He represented himself as being in transitional employment and needed a place to report that he worked out of, and he showed up with his laptop, and it started off really well and then kind of went downhill from there. And so we learned, we actually have a nonprofit that works with that community, that offices in our space. And so that makes it way easier on us. I don't know how we would do it without that organization, quite frankly, because we can just call them and say, hey, can you come to the front desk? But we've never had to, people self-select, and you guys know this, like, if the community is not right for them, they go somewhere else. And we refer people, I can't refer, if I get an inquiry for a big team, obviously I'll send them the common desk. But, I know all the niche players and different cultures and stuff.
Yeah, no, I always find that interesting, the self-selection process, right? And the reason I asked that is, and it's funny, we've never asked anyone that on here, but I do have that conversation with people where they're like, they just didn't fit in. And, there's operators that say, look, we're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing us. And so it's really interesting sometimes how the ecosystem plays out. And so that's really neat.
Absolutely. And I think, when we were first building our community, we benefited just on a short term from like people who whose initial like really affordable offers from WeWork expired, and they were like, oh no, I can't afford this office anymore, so I'll go to Good Coworking. But you know, it's not all, we have a different culture, so that didn't always work out. And I just love it because it's, you know, all about, I love everything about office and workspace culture, and just figuring all that out. It's just like a big experiment. And the fact that the pandemic happened, I think is incredible, because it accelerated some trends that were happening, and you know, from the wellness stuff to like office culture and flexibility, and it's really fascinating right now.
Well, even the live, work, play / just overall, I guess, diversity of uses within buildings, right? And I think you flew over this, but I think it's super important to understand, when you said you are almost like a property manager, that you really are, because you've got, on the primary floor, you've got the co-working, and then upstairs you have almost like spec suite type larger traditional tenants that you and your team manage. Is that just random? Is that like art co-op still up there?
Yes. So there's a law office, an art co-op, an IT company, and a YouTube content creator. So you couldn't be more diverse in terms of the tenants. It's really interesting. But yeah, it's I don't know of a lot of models like ours, because usually I mean, we're just kind of this weird microcosm of, I mean, we also have Airbnbs and loft and residential lofts in the front of the building. And if you stay at an Airbnb, or if you live there, you can benefit for free from our open co-working.
And remind me how many of those there are?
There's 11.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
And they're basically utilities, right? I mean, I've been in one of them. Are they all the same, or
they're just like big studio apartments. They call them loft apartments, but they aren't really true live work. You know, I mean, they are live work, but the live is upstairs and the work is downstairs. Yeah.
So, I mean, speaking of models, Amy, are you starting to see other co-working operators? I mean, I'm sure there's a spectrum, and you were on, you know, the far end of the spectrum in terms of your commitment to sustainability and impact. What are you seeing in terms of other operators like starting to move along that spectrum?
Well, I'm really fortunate, because a lot of the early staffers at the Usgbc National are now corporate ESG leaders. And so I get to hear about like what trends are going on there. And then I'm following what's happening in terms of the larger co-working brands. And a friend of mine was briefly WeWork's chief sustainability officer. And I'm actually not sure where they stand in terms of sustainability engagement right now. I know that they are for sure, they have someone overseeing sustainability and ESG, and they're looking at, you know, they have to do the ESG reporting for their portfolio. I use it as part of my narrative, kind of jokingly, like I wish Adam had kept like the green desk or his very first space, but he was like, oh, that's not profitable. So I'm going to
green desk.
Yeah. Green desk, I think. So that didn't help the narrative that he said, oh, it wasn't profitable. But I would love to say, I know that Industrious is looking at it for sure. I also like that Industrious does some experimental things from time to time. Like they did that outdoor workspace stand-up project.
Right.
Kind of like, how do you connect with nature? And I was, you know, I really admired that, because it kicked off a conversation in the industry. And I heard a podcast interview recently where someone was talking with Shlomo from
Bond Collective.
Bond.
Yep.
And the interviewer was encouraging him to weave in more sustainability and wellness into his brand, especially since he's kind of high end. You know, he's like, yeah, we're looking at that, you know, so I know they're looking at it. And I think I wish I knew of more. I'm trying to keep the conversation alive, and I think it's really honest.
part B of my question for you is you
Yeah.
know, can have such an, what does the scalability of this look like for you? Like, what is,
Yes.
yeah.
Well, it's an interesting question. When I started this venture, I really planned on scaling. I didn't ever set out to be obviously as big as something like WeWork, but having, a strong portfolio in maybe like creative class cities, or maybe even like having some aspect of it be in like class A top cities like New York, because I think, those cities are very much more progressive, and they're I would think that customers would demand it more. But I'm not sure yet whether I'm going to scale with this current brand for various, behind the scenes reasons. But I do have a vision for that in the future, because I think there's going to be demand for it, and it's just a matter of time. And I think I've discovered that I'm a little more ahead of the time than I wish I were. Like, I wish we were already there and I could just go out and get funding tomorrow.
Mhm.
And, many of my mentors have encouraged me that, yes, I can. And Lisa Sky is a good example. She went out and got that money in New York. She, her first space was in Manhattan, one of the most difficult real estate markets, and she did it. And so it's not to say it can't be done, but I think I would look at a partnership differently, and also, of course, pursue the model with management agreements instead of being a tenant, or own my own real estate. That would be the ideal. But
maybe there's a little bit of both, Amy, for any landlords that are listening. You feel like the perfect sustainability diversification of the building partner. I mean, there's so much, you mentioned that at the beginning of our talk, there's so much of that thinking. So you're a great asset to moving that forward.
Yeah. And I wish I had the commercial real estate chops and, finance chops that, so I think people who come into co-working from that angle already know the landscape, and it's easier. Yep. He's my, unicorn hero in terms of like what he's done through hard work, and also, his knowledge base, which is incredible. And he built those relationships and has been incredibly innovative and laser focused. And, I would want to add a partner to the team who is, of the likes of the Nick Clarks of the world, although there's only one Nick Clark. But
there is only one.
You know what I'm inferring there.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I think, I am starting to hear from folks in the industry in terms of like little consulting gigs here and there, but I'd love to just be doing more to convene like educational webinars for the industry on the subject. And also, like I said, either write a book or just, Tracy Wilson and I wrote an ebook just about like starting off. Tracy Wilson, who's one of the partners in Pacific Workplaces, we just did this little ebook about reducing your workspace's environmental footprint. And single-use plastic is a great place to start if you're not going to look at any of your, design and construction pieces. It's low-hanging fruit, and it has a huge impact. So super certification is another thing to add to your portfolio. And differentiate, it's a differentiator. It's pretty easy to do.
Yeah,
our members love it.
It's so often that people reach out to you for questions when it comes to, say, sustainability, but it's not just that, right? You are a huge proponent of mental health and just building a community that addresses, a lot of those things. And some of those, we've all had journeys through that to some capacity, in different ways, shapes, and forms. And I know that's something that you are extremely passionate about as well.
Yes. And it's all tied together, right? Because we don't leave ourselves and our life and mental health circumstances at the door when we come to work. And I think the more we're transparent about things that people struggle with, the better, because it makes us more real as leaders, but also it kind of destigmatizes some of the things around mental health and recovery. And I am the poster child for all of those things. I've been around the block. I got sober right when I moved to Dallas 9 years ago. So, I joke that I'm retired from alcohol. I had, I had my fun, and, it just wasn't working for me. And, I don't think there's any shame in that. I think everyone imagines alcoholics as people just laying on the side of the road with a brown paper bag, and that's just not that's not, yes, that happens too, but it's really some people are wired differently. So I try to be open about that. And the well rating system actually provides a lot of value in terms of their checklist, because you get points for having a mental health library of books and supporting recovery in terms of benefits for your employees, supporting mental health in terms of therapy. They look at it from every angle. I mean, parent support, so many of the things that we put in our space, like including a parent room and a nap room, are just like par for the course now. Like, it's a standard. If you don't have that, you're really behind the times. But you can go much deeper in terms of how you operate from an HR perspective, and a culture when it comes to the wellness and mental health.
So other than capital, what are the biggest hurdles that you've got to overcome to get to where you want to be?
I'd say capital is the biggest. Gosh, that's a really good question. I think it's, quite frankly, I go through these phases of imposter syndrome, and getting over my own hurdle in terms of like my confidence to go out and fundraise, I think is a huge part of it. Mm-hmm. And also just, I think, timing, and also my current business partner, he's great. He came to the table with the building, and he has the flex workspace, contract furniture world perspective. But having another partner on board who would bring that commercial real estate perspective is really critical, I think, and someone who gets it. There are a few champions out there right now. I won't name names, but Gio, you were just saying like, oh, you talk about sustainability often, and quite frankly, I wish more people would be calling me about sustainability, because that would mean that we're further along in the industry. But I don't know that we are, and that's okay. It is what it is, it's tempting to go corporate, but I've really, because there's so much work with ESG right now, but I think that I'm in love with the flex industry and the co-working world. I mean, I haven't met a person who I don't like in this space. You two are huge role models for me, just because of what you've built and you have such incredibly unique leadership perspectives in the industry. And I love it. I mean, when I discovered co-working, it was like, I not only drank the Kool-Aid, but I just like threw out everything else, and I've had a pretty diverse career. So I'm not sure where the future will hold, but I know for sure it will involve sustainability and green buildings, even if I'm just working in green buildings the rest of my life. But hopefully I can stay plugged in and really be a resource for our industry.
I'm gonna role reversal with Gio. Gio has this like incredible gift of telling people what their gifts are at the end of our episodes. You can jump in if you want to, but
no,
Amy, you're so inspirational, and I think so clearly just accomplished, and just intelligent. Is that a weird word to say about sustainability and what you're doing? And I have a lot of admiration for the work that you're doing, and if there's anything that we can do to help your next chapter, count us in, because it's super important.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to chime in on that. Just so I think you sell yourself short, right? I mean, even the way you said, well, Lisa went to Manhattan, and don't get me wrong, what Lisa did was awesome. But I mean, the beginning of your story, coming to Dallas and meeting, knocking on Nick's door, and then meeting the gentleman that had the co-working space, and then even meeting your partner that has this building, right? It's just, it's not necessarily serendipitous because you put yourself out there, right? So it takes a whole lot more than just serendipity, right? It takes grit and passion and grind, and you have that, right? I still remember when you and I probably met 5-6 years ago, and you were going through a tough phase personally and professionally, and it was just, it's so awesome to walk in here today and just see how the space continues to flourish, how it's full of life and people that are giving life back to the community, right? And I truly mean that when I say that, because some of these organizations in here, like you said, is we may be able to love on people, but we don't know how to love on people the way some of these people can, right? I tell people that all the time, is I can love on someone that struggles with depression, anxiety, but I don't know what it's like to crave alcohol when I wake up. I don't know what it's like to be trying to get the next hit or any of those things, right? And so I think I want to commend you for the platform that you have and the ability that you've given people to really go out and serve.
Thank you. Wow, you rendered me speechless. But I think also this community is a testament to my staff, because I really have, if you have good people, they attract other good people. And I mean, that's what co-working community is all about, right? Even if you were just in a like a work suite or a Regis, like, it's about the people. It's about, if you have great businesses in the space doing cool stuff, like those serendipitous conversations in the kitchen and everything else. I mean, co-working is transforming how people work in terms of their routine, but it's also transforming how business is done. So that's really cool. And it's just gonna keep growing from here. So I'm looking forward to seeing how our industry evolves. And it's funny, I give Lisa a lot of kudos. I love New York. I would totally go back to New York or do San Francisco in a heartbeat, because all my nuclear family, my parents and my brother and his wife and kids are all in the Bay Area now, but I started my career in Manhattan and big ad agencies and love it there. Like I would go back, but Dallas is something special because Texas is growing like gangbusters, as y'all know. And I say y'all now.
I know.
So
I was like,
I don't know if New York will welcome me back.
They would. So typically Jamie gets to ask the last question. I'm going to ask it, and it's going to be a curveball for both of you. So what are your 3 favorite things about yourself?
Wow. I would say for me, it's my, I talked about my imposter syndrome, but I also have fearlessly delved into multiple industries, and I've done, I call it my kaleidoscopic journey, being, creative and just following my gut in terms of career move. And I've always followed my gut. So that's one of my favorite things. I would say.
So could we call that one bold? You're bold?
Bold, sure.
Okay, so
bold.
That's one.
I don't know. I'm focusing more on my actions, but I've become an animal rescue nut. So my heart for animals. And
so you're compassionate.
Yes, bold, compassionate. Thank you. You're going to do my personal brand after this, Gio.
Can I just get a copywriter to
my personal brand consultant? And I would say inclusive. Can be cliche, but I'll stand behind that one.
Oh, and that's part of what I love about you, is all 3 of those things are very accurate. So thank you so much for everything you do for this world, right? And I can't just say the community, because the sustainability side of stuff is you're giving back to the entire world. And so very grateful, and I admire you for that. And you are an incredible leader.
Thanks, Gio. Well, I'm excited. Well, I'm seeing you in the space momentarily here because we're just in different rooms, for full transparency. But Jamie, I can't wait to see you at the GWA conference.
Wait, Gio's in your space? For real?
Was I not supposed to say that? This is uncensored.
This is
She doesn't
totally
know-
uncensored. You're supposed to say things that you're not supposed to say. That's the whole point. I love it. I know, Amy, wait, we have to make a date because,
Yes,
right.
I was gonna text you, but oddly, I
Okay.
don't have your mobile number, so I'll get that from Geo after this. And I heard
send-
you're gonna
oh,
be in
yeah.
town for a whole week, so I'm gonna,
In town.
you know, wedge my way into your calendar. And if you want to come and co-work with us at any point, we're
Yeah,
not that
okay,
close
great.
to Frisco, but still,
Let's organize that because that week
Yeah.
is filling up quickly.
I'm sure.
So,
I'm sure.
okay,
it's
let's
around
do
the
it. I would
corner.
love that. Good.
Yeah,
good,
shameless
good.
plug if you haven't. I don't know when this is airing, but register for GWA in Frisco. It's not too
But
late.
you're coming to the conference.
Yes. I'll
Okay,
be there.
good. I haven't seen the full list. No, Gio and I have been shamelessly talking about the conference as much as we possibly can because we want people like you to be there. So a conference is only a conference with the right people in the room. So thank goodness.
Well, it's going to
Yeah.
be, there'll be like a tent revival for the flex industry. Like, I can't wait. It's like a big reunion,
Revival.
Absolutely.
I can't wait. Okay. Thank you, Amy. It was a
All
pleasure.
right. Thanks, you too.